Good afternoon. My name is David Regan. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Sona Nanotech, and with me today is my colleague Len Pagliaro, PhD, who's our Chief Scientific Officer. We're here to talk to you about the cancer therapy that Sona is developing. But before we get into our understanding overview of that therapy, what it is we're developing, how we're developing it, and why we're developing it, we put out a press release yesterday with an important update and development for the business. So we're going to talk a little bit about that to start with, and then get into the core understanding of the business, give an overview of that, which I think may be a repeat for some folks. So I want to keep to the relevant information up front. But as many of you know, at its core, Sona has proprietary technology around biocompatible gold nanorods, very, very tiny pieces of metal near atomic scale that have important properties, patent granted in one territory, pending in others. And we are using it to work on a therapy developed by Len called targeted hyperthermia therapy. Len came to us with that therapy a year ago, and it's effectively a better photothermal therapy for cancer. Came to us looking for the gold nanorods. He had his own company, Sept Therapeutics, and could not find gold nanorods that were biocompatible, that could be produced at scale and were stable. So we started a buyer-supplier relationship at that point, where we'd be the preferred supplier of those materials. And the more and more we worked on the therapy together, we realized that really the gold nanorods are the critical element that's part of that therapy, and in fact would be the monetization mechanism for that therapy, and that we are both better off in terms of getting to market faster by joining forces, which we did. Before we did that, though, we did some diligence, and in speaking with some oncology surgeons, we asked them their thoughts on the therapy that Len had been developing. And the response came back from one in particular who said, look, this is best explained by the fact that I had to tell earlier today a 40-year-old that he has a rectal tumor that we cannot treat with any other treatment other than an excision, complete removal, and therefore a colostomy for the rest of his life. And he could not believe that was the only treatment available to him. He then went on to say, look, it's not a question of if a selective targeted therapy like this that does no harm to healthy cells is going to happen. It's a question of when. And we're working extremely hard right now to make that when happen now. But let me tell you about the update. Of course, forward-looking statements here. This is we are a preclinical company. This is a therapy in development that we are making great strides towards, but it is still early stages. We have partnered with an entity called Excite International. And before bombarding you with all these bullet points, we should explain that Excite was created by senior physicians. It's a not-for-profit organization created by senior physicians who felt that there was a real need and opportunity, frankly, to help new developers of medical devices plan for the development of their medical device in a way so as to optimize the prospects for success and to shorten the timeline to commercialization. In many cases, there are something like 30% of medical devices that would get cleared by the FDA, but then not qualify to be covered by payment plans, in particular in the US, leading to failure. What Excite promises is to connect us with senior physicians, experts in the field, luminaries really, as you'll see, in order to give developers the heads up on what payers are going to want to see and provide early feedback on the developing therapy. So the first process with Excite will be, as discussed on the left here, an early technology review, looking to understand and as a background to the panel of experts they bring together for us, the problem that it's designed to address, what evidence of effectiveness we have to date, the potential value add of the technology, any potential complications, the outcomes are of the therapy. These are part of the language of medical devices. Then on the second side of the page, get into some points here around the next step, which is really providing guidance to the company and the sort of advice on what evidence they believe based on their experience, and we're talking about, some of these panelists are in fact from payer organizations, what they will need to see, because of course the FDA is most interested in safety. Payers are most interested in effectiveness. Two different sets of data needed to support those two things. And on here in terms of the advice that's provided. I just want to flick forward to give you a sense then, before we kick into the main presentation, of who some of the past panelists have been who've served on some of the engagements for Excite, as disclosed on their website. This comes from a much longer list, frankly, and I don't want to go through each one of these, but I just wanted to give folks a sense as to the caliber of professionals and physicians we'll be dealing with here. And that's important for two reasons. One, obviously, there's the experience and expertise they bring to the table in treating the ailments that we're seeking to treat ourselves. Secondly, because of their senior status, they carry weight in the industry. They're connected in the industry. They can become extremely important proponents for this therapy and for our company. So we're looking forward to bringing together a panel of folks such as those, not these specific people necessarily. We'll be informed, and we're working together with Excite to define that panel soon. But we expect the outcome to be tremendous benefit to Sona in terms of making sure we're tracking and addressing the concerns that are going to come in down the road, a year, 2 years from now, by the actions and the studies that we're commissioning today. How you develop those studies, the protocols are of paramount importance in terms of ensuring that we get the right outcomes that is necessary to move this forward. I've got a question here, and there's a chat box at the top of your screen you should see. And I'm asked, is there a cost to the Excite partnership to Sona, either upfront or through their involvement? If so, is there an estimate of costs associated with their assistance? There is, I say they're not for profit, but there is definitely a cost to us. And one of the ways we looked at this was the fact that we were assembling our own panel of experts, but these folks don't come for free and don't come for cheap. And so we saw ourselves as having to, create selected one-off engagements with a variety of physicians, specialist surgeons on a consulting basis. And yet even on the outreach, it's very difficult for a small unknown company, as yet unknown company such as Sona, to connect with, for instance, a professor of surgery at Harvard Medical School. Excite facilitates that through their credibility and, frankly, through their early vetting of this therapy as being something of interest. So there is a fee paying. It's not a huge fee, not insignificant at the same time. Haven't disclosed the precise amount, not for any particular reason, but not terribly material in the grander scheme of things, that's for sure. So very excited with that. I think it's going to be a big help, and we'll look forward to providing updates, hopefully once we have the panel selected that will be specific to our research area. So now, to targeted hyperthermia, why we're developing it, and how we're developing it. And to the how, you have to build the right team from a starting point. And we started with some luminaries in the field here as our advisors, which is absolutely core. We have, in the last year and a half, 2 years, evolved our board to more reflect our focus on oncology and targeted hyperthermia in therapy in particular. So we have recently named Chairman Mark Levonin, who led Sanofi Pasteur to become a $1 billion company, vaccine maker. Walt Strapps, who's CEO of Akosla Ventures Biotech, Neil Fraser, who's the longtime president of Medtronic Canada, which is the Canadian arm of the global medical device juggernaut, a surgeon and corporate director in Dr. Michael Gross, and Jim McGann, financial sponsor with 25 years of experience in capital markets. Now this is our board and our oversight committee for this hyperthermia project. Now, in pulling together the team, we've gone outside our employee base to ensure we have specialist consultants, Glenn Canner, who has experience taking multiple medical device projects from inception all the way to commercialization, which can be a long run. Len, of course, one of our co-founders, Colbert Singh, our head of quality and regulatory, Sandra Brennan, and myself on the project lead management and commercial. Now, as we say here, rectal cancer treatment is often limited to risky surgery and leads to that very poor quality of life outcome. And it's been selected as the primary affliction to go after starting with because there's such a big delta right now between the standard of care, which is too often a complete removal, versus what we're offering here, which is something that we intend to be shrinks the tumor, avoiding, therefore, the need for a resection and a colostomy bag. From a surgeon's perspective, they look at tumors and rectal tumors in particular as good, bad, and ugly, and then treat them appropriately. If it's good, wait and watch. Don't want to do anything too quickly. And then there's chemo, and of course, short course, long course. If no success, though, it gets removed, and that happens way too often. This is what we aim to change. Now, Len, can you tell us about the research we have to date?
Sure. So we've developed a lot of preclinical data over the years, and here are some examples of it. There's a lot more than this, of course. This is on the left, you see a graph of a mouse melanoma model. So it's a mouse cancer model, which is what we were working with at the time. There are 4 curves there. You see that the 3 ones in black and gray rise up and then they stop abruptly. Now, those are graphs of tumor volume. The tumors grew to the point where the animals had to be sacrificed. And so that was the end of the study, basically. The green line is the one where we used targeted hyperthermia. And so it was a combination of gold nanorods and infrared light to generate our therapeutic heat within tumors. And there you can see a significant reduction in tumor volume over the controls. So it's really a great result. And this is using our treatment as a monotherapy in a mouse model, basically. And then on the right, there are going to be some images of a mouse. This is from another study, a different study, in which we compared our treatment to the drug of choice for a tumor model. And so you can see on day 0, right after treatment, there's a large multi-lobe tumor, same animal in all the pictures. 19 days out, a little bit of scabbing from the heat. But again, these mice they're called nude mice. They're very thin skin and very sensitive to heat in their skin. 59 days out, same animal. Skin is healed, animal's healthy, running around, gaining weight, so forth, doing all the things it should. We carried this arm of the study out to 95 days, and 2/3, 66% of the animals were still alive, healthy. We finally sacrificed them and did histology. We looked under a microscope at the tissues, no evidence of tumor histologically. In contrast with the drug of choice, for the tumor model, all the animals were down by 28 days. So a significant improvement over the drug of choice in this model. When we talk about targeted hyperthermia, it's a 2-component medical device system, and the goal of it is to generate therapeutic heat within tumors. So the first component is nanorods. They're gold nanorods. This is what Sona has developed. It's a patented method to make these nanorods in a way that doesn't involve some of the toxic chemicals that are in the normal method for making nanorods. And production has also been scaled. They've been highly vetted through a program at the Nanotechnology Characterization Lab. The images of a red blood cell, that red sphere is a red blood cell, which is a small cell, and those little tiny specks within the red blood cell are the nanorods. So these things are very small. You cannot see them in a light microscope. You need an electron microscope, and this is an electron micrograph to even be able to detect them, to see them. In the center shows our concept for how this will be treated in humans. The nanorods will be injected systemically, and then an endoscope will deliver infrared light to the tumor. And on the right is an artist's impression. That's a close-up of a tumor with the infrared light coming out of the scope inside the GI tract. The nanorods absorb the infrared light. They convert that into heat within the tumor, and it's gentle therapeutic heat, about 44 degrees Celsius, 111 Fahrenheit, that does a number of good things for the tissues. And just briefly, the reason we use red light, infrared light, is illustrated very simply. Here's a laser pointer, and as perhaps you can see, this is a green laser pointer. When I put it through my finger and point it at the camera, you can't see anything. When I take a red laser pointer, and you can see here, this is a red laser pointer, my skin is quite transparent, my tissue is quite transparent to that red light. And so the infrared light travels through tissue harmlessly, but it reaches the goal of the nanorods, the target of the nanorods, and generates heat.
So in terms of the steps to be done here, as I indicated, lots of steps to be done. The goal here really is to do all the studies and more that are going to be necessary in order to get approved to go into human clinical trials. We want to build a mountain of data here, and we're doing that through a series of studies, working with a number of absolute expert contract research organizations who do this day in and day out, and frankly have been extremely helpful in advising us as to what would be and should be typically required of that. However, that's not enough, just going through the step-by-step work of all these studies, because you can have your head down, going step-by-step ahead, and then not be bringing the market with you, if you will. And so for that, you need to engage with stakeholders early on so that you gain their support, and so that they have awareness of the therapy, the important therapy that we're developing. And we're doing that in a number of ways. Excite International is one of those ways, absolutely falls under this, but we're also speaking with Colorectal Cancer Canada, Colorectal Cancer Alliance, the relevant US and Canadian colorectal surgeon associations, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think of what we're trying to accomplish from a market share perspective, if you will, we're trying to steal that share from chemo, radiation, and resections. We want there to be less of those treatments, more of targeted hyperthermia, because those other treatments have really dire consequences associated with them. Our targeted hyperthermia therapy is being developed with the intent to kill only the cancer cells selectively. And we think that can apply for stages 1, 2, and 3 in the case of rectal cancer.
So when we talk about hyperthermia, it's very important to distinguish different kinds of thermal therapy for cancer. Now, thermal therapy is used quite a bit for cancer and other treatments medically currently, but when we talk about thermal therapy, it's typically ablation. Ablation is very high temperatures, 55 Celsius and above, up to 100 Celsius plus. It works, it's effective, it neutralizes tissue, it essentially cooks tissue very quickly, but it is not discriminating between healthy tissue and cancerous tissue or other kinds of tissue. And so if you think about cooking steak, it's medium well done steak or more. In contrast, when we look at hyperthermia, this is a much more gentle subablative temperature, our target being 44 Celsius. At this temperature, if we're thinking about cooking steak again, it would not even be what's called blue rare. So our goal is not to cook tissue, but it's to heat it up to a temperature at which a number of biochemical changes take place. And this is important because cancer cells are more sensitive to heat than non-cancer cells because of their metabolism, their different metabolism. And there are at least 4 things, which you see on the next slide, that this hyperthermia does, gentle hyperthermia does, that ablation does not. And so again, this is 44 Celsius. It shrinks tumors directly because cancer cells go into a cycle of apoptosis and necrosis, programmed cell death. Second, it takes out cancer stem cells, which tend to be drug resistant. Third, it increases perfusion to the tumor so that if it's used together with drugs, and realistically that will be a scenario in the clinic, you can enhance drug efficacy because it can better reach all tumor compartments. And last, but certainly not least, it can stimulate the immune system because you get release of material, partially denatured antigens and cytokines and so on, from tumors into circulation, which can stimulate the immune system. So 4 very important effects that you get from this gentle heat, this hyperthermia, that you do not get from ablation.
So let's go inside the lab here for a minute and show you exactly how this is working, and in particular on the development of our device here, the heating lamp that that Len mentioned. And here we have, let me try that. Press play. Yes. So here we have the light device on our left, and here is a small cuvette with gold nanorods in the solution. You can see the lights turned on, and the temperature probe is starting to register a rise in temperature. That's the infrared energy passing through into the solution with gold nanorods, and the gold nanorods converting that energy into heat. You'll notice we get up to 44 degrees, the target for hypothermia, pretty quickly. It's then turned off, and it starts to fall down in this case. This is the first generation of light device. We are now working with Minatronics in a specialist manufacturing company for medical devices in Minnesota to generate the second light device that can be used in order to be incorporated into the workflow of colorectal surgeons. We announced back in January or February an NCL assessment of our technology. That came about because the NCL is a nanotechnology characterization lab. It was set up by the FDA and the US National Cancer Institute to help developers of nanomedical devices speed their development time to market. And yet they have a very rigorous program, a very rigorous screening for their program and who's allowed into it. Len got into that program several years ago, and we're still effectively in it. And so one of the first things we did when we brought our companies together was to send off Sona's gold nanorods down for their assessment. And I will tell you that for 1 month while we waited for those results, I held my breath. I didn't doubt it, but nonetheless, a clean bill of health was essential to the platform for this company to succeed and for this therapy to be developed. And it came through with flying colors from that assessment from a very credible organization who, by the way, indicated not only look where are these great materials from their perspective and their assessment, but how else can they help was a question. And if we wish to have them join us for our meetings with the FDA, they'd be more than happy to join. That's pretty important. So we're targeting to have our first interaction with the FDA this fall, and the NCL representative will be with us there at the table. Sorry. Len.
Well, so one of the things we've got to think about in this process is de-risking. A lot of what we're doing, the work we're doing, is to de-risk the technology all the way to market. So what we've done already is, first of all, and what's been done by others, is using heat to treat cancer. As I mentioned, that's most commonly ablation. There are a few examples of more gentle hyperthermia out there, not in the US so much, but overseas. So that is, I think, well established in the literature and in the clinic. Photothermal treatment is out there. It's in the clinic in the US and elsewhere. It's with systems that are not as good as our systems in a number of ways, and we'd be happy to go into those details offline. The FDA has approved nanoparticles for injection for human clinical studies, not yet to market, but in human clinical studies. And so that's a very positive thing, of course. And these are metallic nanoparticles, somewhat similar to ours. And then finally, the targeted hyperthermia efficacy and safety, importantly, has been demonstrated really well in small animals and published in peer-reviewed publications. So things that we need to do still are, first of all, to deliver that infrared light through an endoscope to demonstrate safety and efficacy in large animals, and we're working on that currently, to determine the optimal dosage of gold nanorods. When you scale from rodent studies to large animals, there are dosing calculations that need to be performed and some changes there. And to determine the optimal treatment duration. So the amount of gold nanorods, the amount of light, and the duration really is the dosing of heat that the animals will get. And then, of course, to develop intellectual property. And it might be a good time just to mention, I see a question about will we be developing a version of the Minitronics device to use in large animals, and that's exactly correct. One of the goals of that device will be to use it in large animals to validate the fact that, yes, this device can work and can work in an animal and deliver infrared light the way it's supposed to.
Pardon me. Here we go. So from an economic perspective, you've seen the science here and the need, which is obvious, and the good that can come from this. But from an economics perspective, does this make sense for the business? If we look just at rectal cancer in the US alone, there were 46,000 new cases each year. We expect that about 28,000 of those would be treatable by targeted hyperthermia therapy. And we're anticipating revenue per case of about $40,000 US. That would be 2 administrations at $20,000 apiece. If you were to assume a 10% market share in the first year, arbitrary number to give just a sense to the market size, that would be annual revenue of 112 million US. If you take that bridgehead, that beachhead, pardon me, that would be provided by rectal cancer application, having proven that out and taking it to colon cancer, esophageal cancer, and head and neck cancer, each of which the nature of those tumors has similarities to the rectal cancer one, which is important for the THT to work beneficially. Again, taking a 10% market case across the board totals to more than $400 million a year, just on the basis of 10% of what that market is. And that market, of course, is the number of cases here that we're talking about. It's case-based, not dollar-based. Do you want to quickly touch on this, Len?
Sure. So this is obviously a subjective assessment. When we compare our treatment to the standards of care, drugs, radiation therapy, and surgery, in every category we look at efficacy, safety, unwanted side effects, and affordability, we see significant advantages. And so we think those are going to be very important competitive advantages in the marketplace and for patients.
Great.
When we zoom in a little closer on more specific, the closest comparisons, the closest competition we have, there are several out there. There's a company called Nanospectra Biosciences that has a photothermal approach that uses very large particles and a very specialized light source, laser light source, not commonly available. Significant issues with both efficacy and safety. They go for ablation because, as far as we believe, they can't do hyperthermia, what we call hyperthermia. Issues with clinical workflow. There's a German company called Magforce that has a magnetic nanoparticles that are excited by a big magnet, kind of like an MRI magnet. Some issues there with safety and very, very expensive, not commonly available capital equipment. Finally, there are nanoparticles for radiation enhancement, but one of our goals, of course, is to get away from ionizing radiation, which causes damage in itself. And so we think we have advantages here, even when we zoom into the closer competition.
So this past spring, we marshaled the resources we needed to do this steep ascent that we have in front of us. And, I'm very pleased to report now that we're approaching, Camp 2. And we've made some great strides, done great work with Minitronics in terms of advancing the light device, preparing the gold nanorods to be produced at scale under a good manufacturing process element by screening prospective outsourced partners for that production. Our regulatory strategy is now well set and underway. and we're making good moves, but lots of work here still to be done. Now, by way of updates on Minatronics in particular, Len, do you want to speak to that? The device
Sure.
here?
So we've been working with Minatronics on getting the infrared light ported through a fiber optic. And the reason for that is that we want to be able to place that fiber through the free channel of an endoscope. And this would be a conventional off-the-shelf colonoscope, most likely for the tumors we're looking at currently. And so you can see in the middle of the picture, there's a black box with a little sort of gold box inside it. That's the laser light source. It's a diode laser, very compact. There's a blue fiber coming out of that. That is the fiber optic assembly. And then over on the right, that the light comes out, the infrared light comes out of that fiber into a cuvette with the nanoparticles in it. So it's basically similar to the experiment that David showed you earlier, but now we're taking that light through a tiny little fiber, and we've demonstrated that it works perfectly well at the other end, and we can get the heating, the photothermal heating that we need through a fiber, which is very important. And then this is just a graph showing heating. And so that top line is 111 degrees, 44 Celsius. That's our target temperature. And you see the red curve coming up very quickly there. That's using the laser diode through the fiber. And we do controls with tap water. We used another LED light source that did not work as effectively. It worked, but not as effective. And so we've focused on the laser as the best light source to pump it light into a fiber and get out the other end. And then in terms of the regulatory pathway, as I'm sure you know, the regulatory process can be complex. We've engaged very experienced advisory with a former FDA medical devices group, CDRH reviewer, ongoing communications with FDA. We have a almost finalized pre-submission document and a meeting pending. And we're looking at a 2-device strategy. And so one device will be the nanorods. The second device will be the light source. The light source will probably be the easier device in terms of regulatory pathway. The nanorods will be a little bit more challenging. However, with the nanorods, what we expect will happen, in part because we have an excellent safety profile so far, and we're also minimally invasive, is that the nanorods will almost by definition go in as a high-risk medical device. Since they're injectable, after evaluating the safety and efficacy in large animals, when we get those data, we anticipate that our risk level will be deemed to be lower by the FDA, and we will go into the lower regulatory category, which will, of course, be a good thing in terms of the extent of the clinical studies, the human clinical studies we need to do.
And this is where that mountain of data we spoke of comes into play here in terms of being able to give irrefutable evidence to regulators as to the safety of the devices in order to support that application. I mean, I've mentioned, working with a couple of different potential partners. We've screened with a really strong preclinical study protocol that has been drafted, covers right now, I think, 6 different studies as part of that, all focused on the safety of the device. Of course, we're going to want information on the efficacy too, in order to share with the street, which is important, and for our own purposes. Other updates in different areas, the GNR gold nanorod manufacturing, we've made some improvements in that. We've really been refining that process, and we're almost done screening 3 manufacturing partners, and would of course be announcing the selection of that partner. The preclinical trials plan, I think I just spoke to that. And finally, on the engagement, of course, the outreach we're making to a number of different organizations, and something that is going to be facilitated even further by the Excite international engagement. Len, do you want to wrap this up?
Sure. So, obviously we're doing this, as David mentioned, to make a return for investors, and that's clearly important. At the same time, it's really important for us to have an impact on cancer, and we believe we can do that. When we look at rectal cancer and then other other cancers that we believe we can approach in the future, colon cancer, esophageal, head and neck, and we look at the number of new cases and the number of deaths, the numbers are huge. They're really huge. And we think this is an area where we can make a difference in terms of both prolonging life for cancer patients and, at least as important, improving the quality of life for cancer patients. And so that's an important part of our mission.
That's it. So we'll look forward to updating the market. We've acquired over the summer. We had the release that came out on 2 days ago, I guess. And there are lots of activities, streams of work going on, great work going on today. And we'll look forward to updating folks all the way along here. We've further questions here. Any further questions? There's also someone's asking about a concussion and bovine rapid tests. The work continues on those. Hasn't been the emphasis of this presentation. Definitely, it's really to bring people up to speed on targeted hyperthermia therapy. But we'll be updating the market on developments associated with those tests, which is the diagnostic arm of Sona. Targeted hyperthermia, of course, is in the therapeutic side of the company. But if there aren't any other questions, we're always happy to speak, and we'll look forward to communicating regularly with the street this fall and bringing you along on this extremely exciting journey that we think can have an incredibly large impact on many people's quality of life and lives. Thank you.